Good evening, and I welcome you all who are joining us for this Bishop MacKiernan Memorial Lecture for the year 2022. The topic for this evening's talk is a bishop for the shortest time, Bernard Finegan, 1837 to 1887. Bernard Finegan was a Cavan man and lived for 50 years in the middle of the 1800s. And he was a bishop for a very short time, for a mere 17 months in the middle of the 1880s. But in many ways, that period of his life when he was bishop was the least important part of his life, because he had done great work for the earlier years of his life. So we're going to talk about this little known and little understood man who made a huge contribution to Cavan and to the Diocese of Kilmore. I should say that this is the annual Bishop MacKiernan lecture for the year 2022, and it's a privilege for me to be able to give this lecture. Bishop MacKiernan was a great patron of history and the study of local history, and he encouraged myself and so many other people to study local history and to write it up. And each year, the Cavan Library Service and Cumann Seanchais Bhreifne jointly host a lecture in his memory. And it's usually on some aspect of ecclesiastical history. And Bishop MacKiernan made that huge contribution to encouraging others to study history, but also he made a contribution to our local history understanding by his great knowledge of books and his buy-in of books of interest to the local historical studies. So he regularly bought rare books throughout his life, and when he retired, he donated his great collection of books to Cavan Library Service, and they are now housed in the Johnson Central Library in Cavan Town. And earlier today, on the 8th of February 2022, Cavan Library Service and Cavan County Council held an event to publicise this remarkable collection of over 2,000 books, which is an invaluable resource for anyone studying local history in the area. This is just some of the shelves of the books in the library upstairs in Johnson Central Library. And these books are available for study in the library. And if you are doing some study on local history, I'd recommend that you make contact with the library and make inquiries about the Bishop MacKiernan collection, and they will facilitate you and help you to have a look through and see what is available there. So the man that we're talking about in this year's Bishop MacKiernan Memorial Lecture is Bernard Finegan. And he was born just outside Cavan Town in the townland of Corlurgan on the 27th of August in 1837. And he grew up there, going to Cullies National School. And then in 1849, when he was 12 years old, he enrolled in the Kilmore Academy, a school or college for secondary education of boys in Cavan Town. And it was situated near where the presbytery is now. This building here down the bottom on the right-hand side is some of the buildings that that school or college held their classes. So he went there in 1849, and he was a bright young student, and he rapidly acquired a sound knowledge of Greek and Latin languages and other subjects as well. He was very bright, and then in 1854, he entered the St. Patrick's College in Maynooth. And he not only did the normal studies that a clerical student would do over a 7-year period in Maynooth, but he also studied for a year in Dunboyne House, which was part of the college which was set aside for students of exceptional ability that they could do extra postgraduate studies. After his studies in Maynooth, he was ordained a priest in Cavan Cathedral by Bishop Browne, the then Bishop of the Diocese, and immediately he was appointed to the Kilmore Academy as Professor of Classics and French. He was gifted at languages. He was proficient in 5 different languages: English, Irish, Latin, Greek, and French. And he taught the classics and French in the Kilmore Academy. But things weren't going well in the Kilmore Academy at this time. There were all sorts of problems. The very poor building there, but also the students, some of them who were boarders and some were day pupils, were in Cavan Town regularly, and they were frequenting the whiskey shops of Cavan. So discipline was lax, and it wasn't as successful as it should be at this time, with the result that quite a lot of the staff left very quickly. And we find that Bernard Finegan does this as well. He left the Kilmore Academy just 2 years after he had begun there, going first as curate to Kilmainham Wood in County Meath, and then moving back became a curate in Laffey. He was there for 2 years before Bishop Connaughty moved him back into the academy again, this time as president of the Kilmore Academy. Bishop Connaughty, who newly appointed bishop, knew that this young priest was the one to bring about the necessary reform in the academy, and he appointed Bernard Finegan as president of the Kilmore Academy when he was only 28 years old. So he was president there in the college in Cavan, and immediately began introducing reforms into the college. He introduced a strong discipline and improved the standards of teaching and discipline. And he, as I say, did a great job on reforming it and preparing it to become a seminary. He was also much in demand as a guest preacher and speaker at various events around the diocese at this time. And I mentioned earlier that he had been born in 1837, so Bernard Finegan was 10 years old when the Great Famine struck. And I've no doubt but the famine had a great impact on his life. He saw hunger, poverty, and starvation and death all around him during the famine years. And this impacted on it, with the result that he always sided with the poor and was in touch with the people who were struggling, especially the poor tenant farmers of Cavan. So he joined the National Association in 1866, an organisation to promote tenant rights, educational freedom, and the disestablishment of the Church of Ireland. So he involved himself in a lot of the movements that were going on at the time. It was obvious that the Kilmore Academy wasn't adequate for the needs of the diocese, and so a decision was made that there was need to build a new college on a green site outside of Cavan Town. And this notice appeared in the Anglo-Celt in 1868. It says that His Lordship, that's Bishop Connaughty, or Zealot Bishop, has determined to build a new college that will be at once an ornament and a source of pride to the diocese, where learning and religion may go hand in hand, and health and strength of body make equal progress with the culture of the mind. So the decision had been made to build this new college outside of Cavan Town, and Bernard Finegan would play a vital role in this transition from the old college to the new. It was going to cost a huge amount of money to build this new college, and so in 1868, in the summer of 1868, 3 priests of the Diocese of Kilmore were selected to leave Ireland and to go to America to raise funds for the new college. Bernard Finegan, John Boylan, and Cormac McSharry were the 3 priests who were chosen. And they were chosen because they were all gifted speakers and capable men. And they left Queenstown, or Cove in Cork, on board the Yalta ship on the 12th of September 1868 to sail to New York. They had a difficult crossing because of storm, but they arrived safely there on the east coast of the United States. And if here up on the top, I don't know if you can see it clearly or not, but we have a picture of the United States showing the railroads that were in place at the time they went to America in late 1860s. And you can see that virtually all of the railroads are on the eastern half of the United States, with only one railroad going west to California. So the three men spent much of their time on the eastern half of the United States, speaking to places where the Irish diaspora were based and raising money for the new college there. They worked tirelessly doing that, moving from place to place. But Bernard Finegan not only worked on the East Coast, he went out, most likely on the single railroad line that went out across the Sierra Nevada mountains and into California. He went out there, following in the footsteps of the miners who had gone out in 1849 when gold had been found in California. He went out there to California, and even though there was no infrastructure of good roads or railroads in California, he traveled by horseback and covered wagon and possibly on foot even, or on mule back, going from town to town, raising funds for the new college. He then came back to the east part of the United States again, and we find that on the 15th of March, 1869, Father Bernard Finegan is given a lecture called St. Patrick's and the Irish Race to a crowd of over 4,000 people in the magnificent Cooper Institute in Manhattan. He speaks there on just 2 days before St. Patrick's Day, appealing to the nationalism and to the faith of the Irish people in New York. He and the other two priests stayed for 22 months in America and raised a remarkable amount of money, £8,000 during that time. They returned to Ireland in the summer of 1870, and Bernard Finegan resumed his role as president of the Kilmore Academy and teacher there as well. But within a short time, he was fundraising at home as well. And Bishop Connaughty purchased the Cullies House and estate just outside Cavan town, this huge 500-acre farm and big house there. And the reason he bought it was, first of all, to provide a house for the bishop of the diocese, because the bishop had no permanent house in the diocese. So Cullies House was to become the bishop's house, but also the land that he bought he was hoping to get a good site for a new diocesan college on that site. And so Bernard Finegan began his fundraising at home in Ireland among the laity and the clergy of the Diocese of Kilmore. And in an open letter to the laity of Kilmore in 1870, he wrote that Bishop Connaughty has purchased a large and valuable property, and a more desirous place for the new college could not be found in Ireland. Plans for the new college are completed. The building, which will be commenced in spring, will be unsurpassed for beauty, health, and comfort. You are requested to aid us in this good and holy project, so agreeable to our religious and national feelings. It will be a monument to our piety as Catholics and our patriotism as Irishmen. So he began this fundraising at home, having completed 22 months of work in America. And this appeal at home in Ireland raised approximately £11,000 over a 2-year period. So we find that Bernard Finegan had worked tirelessly to raise a total of 19,000. He worked, along with others in America, but mostly on his own in Ireland, to raise money for the new college. And remarkably, over a 6-year period, from 1868 to 1874, he was directly involved in raising £19,000, the equivalent of £2.5 million in today's money. So he was successful, an incredibly successful fundraiser for the new St. Patrick's College in Cavan. By May 1871, they were in a position to lay the foundation stone for the new college in Cullies in Cavan. And they invited Cardinal Paul Cullen, the first cardinal ever to be appointed in Ireland. They invited him to lay the foundation stone. And it was a great coup to get Cardinal Cullen, who was, as a Archbishop of Dublin, and also Cardinal and Primate of all Ireland, to get him to lay the foundation stone. So he came on that day, and there were over 4,000 people present, including 7 other bishops and 150 priests present. They had a whole day of events, and various deputations went to meet Cardinal Cullen, including Bernard Finegan and the other priests on the staff of Kilmore Academy, Andrew Boylan, Peter Galligan, and James Dolan. And they, along with some students, went and met with Cardinal Cullen, and their address to him concluded by saying, "The blessing of your enemies will prosper the work and will bring the happy consummation we all so earnestly desire." So Bernard Finegan, again, an integral part of the events of that day, the 23rd of May, 1871. At a full day of events, and this is the beautiful trowel that was commissioned for to mark that day, was a lovely ceremonial trowel that was presented to Cardinal Cullen and is now in the Kilmore Diocesan Archive. And this is what's written on it. It was presented by William Hague, architect, to His Eminence the Most Reverend Paul Cardinal Cullen, Archbishop of Dublin, Primate of all Ireland, on the occasion of his laying and blessing the foundation stone of Kilmore Diocesan College, the 23rd of May, 1871. So William Hague, the famous architect, was the architect for the new St. Patrick's College, Cavan, and his father was the building contractor who did most of the building of the new college. That work continued for almost 3 years, but just to finish on the foundation day, the site of the new college was described in the Anglo-Celt as being a place of beauty, of scenery, picturesque plantations, undulating meadows, and a shaded avenue. So a lovely site for the new college. And pictured here up on the right is Cullies House here, and you can see meadows and hay there on front of it. They had a full days of events with speaking, both at the site of the new college and also at the bishop's house. And they erected a marquee to adjoin the bishop's house for the day, and by 6 o'clock in the evening, over 200 guests sat down for dinner at Cullies House. And then at 10 o'clock at night, Cardinal Cullen and the other bishops are brought back in carriages back to the bishop's residence in Cavan town. So a big event, a big day, and the culmination of years of hard work to get to that day, to the laying of the foundation stone. The college was opened on the 12th of March, 1874, and the staff of 4 priests and 2 laymen and 83 students moved from the Kilmore Academy to the new college. Bernard Finegan was the last president of the old academy for its last 9 years, and the first president of the new St. Patrick's College, Cavan. So he was a key figure in this transition from one college to another, and his role in that transition and the setting up of the new college cannot be overstated. Just to explain that the new college was both a secondary school and a seminary, with the result that you had students there from the age of 12 to 25. So it was very difficult to set up a curriculum to meet the needs of all of these different ages of students. But during the period of time of 12 years that it was a seminary, 39 priests did their studies in St. Patrick's College and were ordained from there before the seminary was closed in 1886. My guess is that after 4 years as president of St. Patrick's College, that Bernard Finegan was exhausted, and in January 1878, he was appointed parish priest of Kinawley in Fermanagh. Then 2 years later, he moved nearer to Cavan town when he was appointed parish priest of Drumlane. My guess is that the aging Bishop Connaughty was depending more and more on Bernard Finegan, and he wanted him to be nearer to him in Cavan to help him out. And then we find that in August 1882, Bernard Finegan was appointed Vicar General of the Diocese of Kilmore. I mentioned earlier that Bernard Finegan had lived through the famine and witnessed starvation and death, and that as a result of this, he became involved in improving the lot of poor people that he in his parishes. he was very aware of the poverty of the tenant farmers who didn't own the farms that they worked, but worked them hard and then had to pay rent to landlords and could be evicted without notice by the landlords if they failed to pay their rent. And so we find him becoming involved both in the Land League movement and also in the Home Rule politics. He became involved with the movements led by Charles Stewart Parnell, Home Rule movement, and the Michael David Land League movement as well. With the result that when he was in Drumlane, we find that in August 1885, for instance, that one of his parishioners, a man called Michael Sexton, had been evicted from his cottage in Drumlane parish. And what happened then, and this is what the Anglo-Celt says, the stalwart and patriotic sons of Drumlane assembled in their numbers under the guidance of their esteemed pastor, the very Reverend Dr. Finegan, to erect a worthy dwelling to shelter the evicted. So what happened was that in August 1885, a large group of people, stonemasons, carpenters, gathered, and they built a new cottage all in one day for the evicted tenant farmer, Michael Sexton. And Father Finegan, their parish priest, was there all day, taking a central role in what was happening. And he gave a speech to them in the afternoon and encouraged them to continue working for tenants' rights, but to do so in a peaceful way. Bishop Connaughty died on the 17th of January 1886, only months after this event in Drumlane parish. And Bernard Finegan was the clear choice of the priest of the diocese to succeed him. And so on the 10th of March 1886, less than 2 months after Bishop Connaughty's death, Bernard Finegan received word from Rome that he was to become Bishop of the Diocese of Kilmore. Bernard Finegan was a very popular choice of the laity and clergy of the Diocese of Kilmore, and there was great joy when news spread that this gifted and bright man who was advocate for the tenant farmers, that he was going to be made the new bishop. My guess is that Bernard Finegan himself was not overjoyed on hearing the news. He struggled to cope with the news, and he spoke of the awful weight placed on my unworthy shoulders. But he was ordained Bishop of the Kilmore on Pentecost Sunday in the 13th of June, 1886. And Bishop Francis McCormick, who was Bishop of O'Connery, he said in his homily that rarely, if ever, had a mitre been bestowed with more thorough and earnest acclamation than the one which had just been placed on the head of the newly consecrated bishop. In other words, what he was saying is that Bernard Finegan was one of the most popular men ever to be made bishop here in Ireland. Quite a tribute to the newly consecrated bishop. When the college opened in 1874, there was an outstanding debt of £7,000, which was a huge debt on it at the time. And the debt continued to get worse in the following years because there weren't enough students to pay to meet the costs of running the college each year. And particularly in the last years of the 1870s, 1877, 78, and 79, there were so many bad harvests and agricultural depression in the country that the number of students attending the college decreased. So there was need for decisive action. Bishop Connaughty had left it to his successor to sort out. But within weeks of becoming bishop, Bernard Finegan took the following actions. First of all, he closed the major seminary. It would no longer be a place where people would do theology study for the priesthood. He also allowed the college to take in day boys, with the result that more students could study there. He reduced the number of domestic staff, and he closed the college bakery and the gasworks. And this prompt action saved the college from financial ruin, because that's the direction it was headed when he became bishop. I should say that this painting here is a painting by Leonor Kineja of the college, and it was made in the year 1946. Bishop Finegan, as I had health issues. My guess is that all the hard work he had done in previous years had taken its toll on his health, even though he was only in his late 40s when he was made bishop. So he had health issues, and to give an idea of how serious those health issues were, he was unable to attend the bishops' meeting in Maynooth just 2 weeks after he had been made bishop. He had chest problems, bronchial problems, and on doctor's orders, he went to the spa waters in Hamburg in Germany, and later traveled to Toulouse and Lourdes in the south of France in the hope that the good weather would improve his health. And it did help his health for sure, because he returned in late August or early September of 1886 and immediately started a very difficult round of confirmations around the diocese. There had been no confirmations for a number of years because of Bishop Connaughty's poor health, with the result that he had huge numbers to confirm of both children and adults around the diocese. He completed his rounds in the autumn of the confirmation, getting around the diocese in the autumn of 1886, and then in January 1887, he went to Rome for the ad limina visit that was due at that time. But again, we find that he travelled through France on to Italy, but we found that his health was poor and he had to stay in France, move very slowly, because he wrote on the 10th of February 1887, he wrote that I am compelled to travel slowly on account of bad health. But he did get to Rome, probably the end of February 1887, and met with the Pope and gave his report of the state of the Diocese of Kilmore to him. And he returned to Ireland just in time for Easter in April 1887. But his health still was not good. It continued to deteriorate. And he died of pneumonia in Cullies House on the 11th of November in 1887. He was just 50 years old when he died, and he had been bishop of the diocese for a mere 17 months. So that's that's a short account of it. Just to talk about this picture here is a picture of the St. Patrick's College, Cavan. It's a postcard which was posted on the 3rd of April in 1915. So just to make an assessment, I suppose, of Bernard Connaughty's life and the impact that he had on the diocese and on County Cavan. I should say above here that here's another postcard of St. Patrick's College, Cavan, of the College Chapel, this postcard was posted on the 15th of June 1915, and it shows the interior of the College Chapel with a side altar here on the right, and no seats on that right-hand side in the back part of the chapel. But to assess his time as Bernard Finegan's contribution, all we can say is that he made a huge contribution to the Diocese of Kilmore during his short life. There's no doubt about it at all, but his greatest contribution was the area of education, especially the pivotal role that he played in setting up St. Patrick's College in Cavan. He was an extraordinarily successful fundraiser. There can be no doubt about that. He was involved in fundraising both in the United States and in Ireland, and was centrally involved in raising £19,000, the equivalent of about £2.5 million in today's money, for the new college. As the last president of the Kilmore Academy and the first president of the new college, he was a key figure, the fulcrum, to bring about that change from one institution to the other. He was a gifted preacher and a natural leader, and Bishop Connaughty depended on him to get things done. We see that by Bishop Connaughty's decision to appoint him president of the Academy when he was only 28 years old. He had a great affinity for the poor people of the county and the diocese, and he worked tirelessly both with the Home Rule Party and also with tenant rights movements to try and improve the lot of his parishioners and the people of his diocese. His role in setting up the new college and his contribution to the diocese generally has been largely overlooked by historians, possibly because he was only bishop for such a short while. Historians have neglected his life up until now, and he has not been given the credit that he is due for the amazing work that he did for the diocese, and particularly for the new St. Patrick's College in Cavan. Just briefly to look at a couple of images of him. The one on the left here is the only photograph that I could get of Bishop Finegan. It was taken in June 1886, and he's pictured in a photographic studio in his episcopal robes. And we see him that he's a fine-looking, tall man, sensitive face and alert eyes, and that's the photograph then that this posthumous painting of him, which was done by George Colley, is based on that photograph. If we look at the top half of that photograph, we will see that that was the photograph that Colley used to paint this painting of him. Two paintings of Bishop Bernard Finegan have survived. One is in the Diocesan Pastoral Centre, and the other is in the Cathedral sacristy in Cavan Town. Just so that's given a brief account of Bernard Finegan's life. There's a much more detailed account of him that I've given in an article that I've written for this or for last year's Bhreifne journal. So you get much more detail in that journal on the life of Bernard Finegan. I should say that the Bhreifne journal for 2021, its editor, Dr. Bredal Scott, managed, despite the pandemic, to bring out another high-quality Bhreifne journal. And you will see here on the right-hand side some of the articles that are in that journal. You'll see the great variety of articles by different historians, and you can read all of them in this journal. And so the journal is now available. If you check the diocesan or the website, the Bhreifne Journal website, you will get more information. Or if you contact Cavan Genealogy Centre, they will be able to provide you with a copy of the journal. I'd recommend, if you have an interest in local history, that you become a member of the Bhreifne Historical Society. You can do that by paying €25 a year, and for that you will become a member, but also will have the Bhreifne Journal posted out to you each year, and that you can learn more about all sorts of different aspects of local history in East and West Bhreifne. So that brings us to the end of our talk this evening on Bernard Finegan. I hope that it's of some interest to you, that you enjoyed, and I say if you want to get more information about him, you will find that in the Bhreifne Journal of 2021. I thank you for joining us, and I hope that, as I say, you enjoyed this lecture and found it of some interest.